You once said no adaptation has ever captured Frankenstein whole.
That includes this one.
Well, for me, as a huge fan of a book, I think this absolutely has captured it. I think it's so rare that an adaptation goes beyond what you imagine as a reader and gives you something new as well. So to achieve that with a story that is so epic but so delicate, I think is just an enormous task.
Yes, it is. And you're right about the way you describe it, because it has to be epic and a chamber piece at the same time. It's a little duets, 4 or 5 characters having duets, and then you have the big symphonic aria. Yeah.
How long have you been thinking about how you would translate the story to screen and the changes that you would make?
Ridiculous as it sounds, I've been thinking about it for 54 years. and planning and thinking, how do I solve this? You know, what is fused in this movie is my conscientious study over the decades of the Romantics, Mary Shelley, Gothic fiction, Anne Radcliffe, Percy, Lord Byron, her own biography, my own biography, everything that is in between the structures is there. Like I believe adaptation is a great word, because it's like a fish having to adapt to land. It's not a subtle thing. It has to grow legs. It has to grow lungs. It's pretty brutal. But if you manage to, there's an alchemy in the process where you subtract things and add things, and the empty spaces in between stay. So it's the spirit of the book. It's not the book, but it's the spirit of the book. And, you know, war is in the movie because war framed the Romantic movement. Mary Shelley's mother went to the French Revolution. Lord Byron wrote through the aftermath of Waterloo and wrote a beautiful poem on that, which is quoted at the end of the film. Mary Shelley is captured by Scotland, Bath, Dundee, Edinburgh. Well, then I decided to move Edinburgh into the forefront of the movie, blah, blah, blah. These are things that come out of love, not out of prudishness. You know, I think there's a difference. I think that I always say it's like Johnny Cash singing Hurt. Trent Reznor wrote it, but I only listen to Johnny Cash because he feels it. So, you know, there's a teenage Protestant girl inside of this Mexican Catholic boy somewhere in there.
The novel is obviously 200 years old.
Yes.
But it remains incredibly popular with modern readers. Why do you think that might be? And what do you think this book has to tell people about the world in 2025?
It's an incredibly voracious book. It's written by somebody that wants answers and wants them now. It's written by somebody that is iconoclast and somebody that is messy in the best way, you know. He's asking with the urgency of teenage years questions that should have been answered by her betters in a better way, you know. It's somebody that has a conflict with the father, which is something that is not in the book, and yet it's in the book. Because she writes Matilda, and her last 2 books are all about tyrannical fathers. So it's there, pulsating, the idea of a birth without the agency of woman, the fusion of birth and death, the fusion of love and life being the enemy. All these things are so now. Think about it, 1818, her mother writes an essay about the horrible role of womanhood in society. You're either worshipped as a beauty, worshipped as a giver of birth, or ignored as an old crone. And she said, what is my place in this? Where do I breathe? Now. Senseless wars, destroying, ravaging lands, now. The urgency of saying, what makes us human? Why am I here? Now. So when the vocabulary of human imagination is articulated by 10, 20 basic myths, Tarzan, Sherlock Holmes, Pinocchio, Jekyll and Hyde, you name it. Even if you haven't read the books, you know what we're talking about. If I say you're a regular Jekyll and Hyde, you know what I'm talking about. You're a regular Pinocchio, or, you know, Farage is a regular Pinocchio, whatever you want. You understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's why it's immortal, because it takes the smallest inflection to make the song new. You know, it's Frank Sinatra singing a French song and making it my way. And you go, oh, that's a French song. No, it isn't. It's Frank's.
The entire film is full of stunning dramatic frames and romantic imagery. I wanted to ask if there were any specific artists that inspired these shots when you were imagining them.
Absolutely. What I do is I have a huge library table at home, and I bring, my home is a library. So I go through the libraries, 13 libraries in one house, and I collect in a library cart all the books that when I used to research the screenplay, and I take them to that library, and there's Fuseli, Caspar David Friedrich, William Blake, Grimshaw, portraiture from the 1810s to the 1850s, and I accumulate all this, and then I open them, I read and I write. I have an 1835 library of medical terms, about 8 volumes that include surgery, vasculation, pulmonary disease, all of that, and I browse and read the terminology, and I try to immerse myself in that, and the images make it. Shackleton photography of the frozen ships, teams of Norwegian or Danish explorers, and then at the end of the 2.5 years that takes to write this screenplay, I feel like I'm high on something, and I'm high on images that are not movies. It's extremely important in your research in making a movie not to reference movies. You have to go to, like I was doing Pacific Rim, and in order to achieve the stature of the robots, I would reference the sculptor Boccioni, which is an Italian futurist, which has striding figures. That's better than referencing another robot. So you are very accurate in that. Is those images, the most romantic images of Friedrich, or the Ghost of a Flea by William Blake is an influence on the design of the creature, things like that. And phrenology manuals, if you see the creature, there are phrenology lines in the skull.
There's this amazing book that you published, which is filled with your notebook images.
Yes.
Does that mean that somewhere at home you have loads of notebooks stuffed with images for Frankenstein?
Well, not loads. I mean, there are images of Frankenstein all the way to Kronos. And the makeup effects, if you see Kronos again at the end, and the makeup effects of the elder vampire in Blade 2, they're similar tries on that alabaster makeup. But the house is a notebook. The house is a notebook, and essentially it's an exploded brain view. Yeah. A library, when you visit anyone for dinner, beware, you go for the library. And you say, I'm going to get along with this person, or I'm going to leave early. I got to be excused in 20 minutes.
The suspense of not knowing what the monster was going to look like added so much to the overall impact of the film for me. So was that a conscious choice? Yes. Was it important to you to not show that in any promotion?
100%. No, not only that, in the way we do in the movie, for example, the vocabulary of the monster. He talks because he says, bring him to me. And he says, Victor. Then he learns 3 words, Victor, Elizabeth, friend, right? But you see how he builds that. And when we did the monster, we show you in stages. We show you the half corpse, which had surgery lines, the waxes in Victor's apartment, which are very elegant. And then we show him with the silver mask and the silver rib cage. And then we finally reveal only the lower portion when it says, Victor. And then little by little, you see him as a giant newly born. And then he grows the hair. Then we put him together for you, no pun intended. You have to, as a director, you say, how are they experiencing the movie? I learned that from Walt Disney. Walt Disney knew his audience. When people say, what do you do, Mr. Disney? You don't draw, you don't direct, you don't color. And he said, oh, but I make sure that everyone else does. And a director needs to say, how is the audience experiencing this movie? My idea is, let's experience it with an attack on the ship that is so brutal that you say, oh, the monster is formidable and terrible. And then at the end of the movie, you go, now I know why he did that. You know, it's how you experience that.
Guillermo, we are out of time, but thank you so much for
What?
giving us. I know.
Thank you, guys.